Today I'd like to start out with a little anecdote. So over the summer, I had the opportunity to work on a political campaign for the first time. And this was really amazing for a huge politics nerd like me because I got to work from the political arena from the inside for the first time. So I worked on a Democratic campaign in Michigan's 7th District, which should be projected behind me right now. Basically, one of my duties as a field intern was to canvass a low-income neighborhood, a neighborhood of Section 8 housing. If you don't know what canvassing means, canvassing is basically going door to door and informing constituents about the candidate that I'm representing. So without a doubt and without exaggeration, this was one of the most eye-opening experiences I've ever had in my entire life. I had the opportunity to talk to several registered but undecided voters about issues that they cared about. And we have to keep in mind that a lot of the people that I spoke to in this neighborhood were actually very disenfranchised by many different axes of oppression. For one, they were all living in a low-income neighborhood. Many of them were people of color, and many of them were living with a disability as well. So because of this, the issues that they were most concerned about included public school, because their public school system had been defunded to the point where they didn't even have AP classes anymore, and their students were struggling to graduate because they became victims of the school-to-prison pipeline. These issues also included things such as healthcare, disability benefits, and Social Security, because many of them couldn't work because of issues outside of their control, but they still needed healthcare to live. So talking to all these people and connecting to their plights firsthand really just brought a question in my mind that I think many of us have asked ourselves today. What is it that I specifically can do to help? Well, why am I giving you this anecdote? It's really, I'm sure that many of us know that, of course, there are many people who live under a very low standard of living in the world. And on a global scale, many people live even farther below the poverty line. There's so many people around the world who live under several different axes of oppression, and it can be discouraging to see this and to want to do something to change this. There are many people, however, with great ideas and great intentions to help alleviate the suffering of people on a worldwide scale. However, whenever we do this, I think that it is imperative that we ask ourselves, what is it that I can do to help? Am I actually being an activist, or am I just appearing to be active? So behind me there should be projected 3 images from my Facebook account. The most recent one is from 2016. I realize that a lot of people my age don't really use Facebook anymore, but the most recent one is from 2016 when there was still a little bit more acceptable. From the left, these images are from 2016 after the Pulse shooting in Orlando, Florida, from 2016 after the Charlie Hebdo shooting in Paris, and from 2015 after the legalization of same-sex marriage in America. So what is something that all 3 of these images had in common? The answer to that is that they actually did nothing to help the causes that I said that I was supporting. So I wanted to seem like an activist. And I thought that this counted as activism, but it actually did nothing to support the causes that I said that I was supporting. In fact, it may have even done more harm than good. But I wanted to look like I cared, didn't I? I mean, as a young lesbian, the fact that the Pulse shooting happened was absolutely abhorrent to me and my community. And the victory that the legalization of same-sex marriage caused really was amazing for me. And I wanted to look like I cared. The same thing for the Charlie Hebdo shooting. As a concerned global citizen, it was very difficult for me to see the amount of violence that was going on. And of course, I wanted to look like I cared, didn't I? Did I do anything other than... Sorry about this, okay. Did I do anything other than reblog discourse posts on Tumblr and change my profile picture temporarily? The answer, unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, is no. So today I'm here to talk to you about performative politics. Performative politics, as once eloquently defined by my friend Zainab, are politics that are undertaken only to make one look more virtuous, to elevate one's own self-image. We also know this under the name of performative activism, performative allyship, slacktivism, or armchair activism. It doesn't just look like changing our social media profile pictures temporarily. It can also do things like, can we change the slide, please? It can also look like politicians tweeting out their thoughts and prayers after a mass shooting or a tragedy of a similar caliber, but they do nothing to enact legislation to prevent that from happening again. It can look like, can we change it one more time? It can look like a corporation piggybacking off of a social movement or cause, co-opting it in order to sell a product. Can we change it one more time? Thank you. It can look like media giving a platform to oppressors that they condemn, supposedly, but giving them a space to advertise themselves. On an even smaller and more individual scale, it could even look like saying, I'm an ally to the LGBT community, I have a gay friend. Or, I'm not racist, I have a friend of color. Now, I want to give a disclaimer. I'm not here to just elevate myself. I'm not here to elevate myself at all into being like a very enlightened activist or anything. I am still learning what is the best way for me to be an effective advocate and a good ally. Having been exposed to so many different axes of oppression having seen the effects of these axes of oppression through my internship and many other situations that I've lived through, have actually exposed me to many different lessons about performative politics and what I can do to be an effective advocate in myself. So since I started with an anecdote about electoral politics, I think it's appropriate for me to continue with that subject. So, how many times have we seen, for example, a politician posing with activists of color or Black youth on Instagram and then posting hashtag Black Lives Matter, but then turning around and dealing in for-profit prisons, thus perpetuating the system that these activists are actually fighting against? How many times have we seen a politician say that they are going to support the LGBT community if they get elected, but then you do some research and figure out that the truth is that they've not been supporting LGBT community throughout their career. In fact, they've been actively opposing it. Politicians will sometimes use social causes and movements as a means to get elected. They see the plights that people have, and they use people who are oppressed they use the hope of people who are oppressed to get elected. So what is something that we as individuals can do to combat performative politics in an electoral arena, even if we are not politicians ourselves? The most important thing that we can do is to be educated voters. Oftentimes, if we're over 18, it is very important for us to be informed and to go out and vote, because even though our vote has been disenfranchised by systems such as gerrymandering or the Electoral College, our vote is still an opportunity to tell the politicians who are in place, or to elect politicians who actually are not performative, who are effective advocates and good allies to the communities that they say that they will support in their platform. If we're under 18, or even if we're over 18, everybody also has the opportunity to practice their civic duty by demonstrating, by contacting their representatives, by contacting their politicians, sending them emails, phone calls, or even doing things like demonstrating in a protest or gathering in an organized group and meeting with your representatives firsthand. The entire purpose of popular government is that politicians work for you and for me. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we are holding the people who are elected accountable for to hold them accountable for the things that they promised people who are oppressed, for the causes that they said that they would support if they were elected. On a more personal scale, what is something that we can do as individuals to stop ourselves from engaging in performative politics and actually being effective allies and advocates? For example, can we change the slides one more time? The one before. There we go. For example, sometimes people will do things like wear these t-shirts that say feminist on them, but they're actually fast fashion t-shirts that end up hurting the women who make them in sweatshops abroad. So when we want to voice our support for feminism, as an example of a social cause to support, something that we can do to be less performative and instead be more effective is to join with local women's groups such as Planned Parenthood or Safehood, among others, or Safe House, among others, and actually work with women, listen to the plight of women, to see what we can do to fix the societal oppression that is affecting us. Feminism, of course, isn't the only social cause that we can support for ourselves. To use a more contemporary example, the gun control movement that is happening currently, it's really, of course, as citizens, it's really amazing for us to stand with people who have been victimized by these situations and do things like tweet out our condolences or change our Instagram bios to acknowledge the victims or the survivors of a mass shooting. But something that we can do to be even more effective as allies and advocates is to actually demonstrate with our community and stand in solidarity with survivors and victims by contacting our representatives to change legislation, to enact legislation to prevent this from happening again. Of course, these are only two, feminism and gun control are only two causes that I believe are very worthy of attention. But one more point that I'd like to make is that oppression is never an ideal to be reached. Of course, the entire purpose of advocacy is to stop oppression, to stop societal problems like it. And one thing that we can do to make sure that this is something that we are doing is listen to people who are actually oppressed by all these problems. So for example, white people and non-black people of color, it is our duty to listen and stand in solidarity with our black brothers and sisters and support them in the struggle for equality. The same thing should go for men, who should listen to women, cisgender and heterosexual people to LGBT people, abled people to disabled people, and so on and so forth. Finally, one thing that every single person can do to be an effective advocate is find something that fulfills you. So what I'm saying is that everybody has time, energy, resources, and privilege that they can allocate to help other communities and other causes move forward in their struggles. So for example, some causes that personally fulfill me and make me feel like I am allocating all of this effectively are, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, environmentalism, immigration reform, and so many others. I want to encourage each and every one of you today to find a cause that makes you feel like you are allocating your time, energy, resources, and privilege responsibly and effectively in order to help make the world a better place and be more of an effective advocate and ally rather than a performative one. Thank you.